Hi, welcome back. And we're talking with Alison Sunstrum from GrowSafe today about some of the GrowSafe systems. And you've got two case studies that you brought along today, one in a feedlot environment and one in a forage and pasture environment. So I'm going to let you talk about these and tell us how they work.
Okay. Our first system that we talked about was our feed intake system, and we basically started monitoring things off of our experience with that system. We started looking at profitability factors in the feedlot, and what we developed was a system that would measure cattle using an in-pen measurement unit, so looking at cattle around a watering system. We developed a system that would measure cattle non-invasively. Again, we were collecting the RFID tag and data from biometric and environmental sensors, things like wind speed, temperature, humidity. These units had to be wireless and solar powered. One of the things that we found with our technology development is that technology must be robust and reliable to work in a feedlot setting. All of our units, all of our technology is remotely connected to us over the internet, so we're capable of monitoring our systems, and over the period of time that we've been in business, we've monitored cattle, millions of cattle all around the world. Now, why would we want to develop this system? Rob, if you could just go to the next graph, it might give you an idea. The reason why we want to measure things in the feedlot is essentially sick cattle and market-ready cattle today are identified through visual assessment. So you send your cowboy out to find sick cattle, and that might be one of the hardest jobs that any cowboy has or any pen rider has today, is to find sick cattle. We also find that the variation in feed efficiency amongst cattle is very different from one animal to the next, from between breeds and within breeds. The variation in feed intake to the same amount of gain in production is very different. And so we have a test research site. The Morrisons, Rod and Cheryl Morrison, allow us to place our technology and trial it there. I'm showing an example of the profitability in the pen that we measured using our GrowSafe beef and feed intake equipment. And what you're looking at is the net income for every animal in the pen. And this was done in 2007, at the time when feed costs were extremely high. And the pen was profitable on a per head basis. It was $13 per head, and at that time, if you had got a $13 per head profit, you would have been very happy.
I'm going to ask you a loaded question. Is that
Sure.
all labor in and all overhead in as well?
That's everything in.
Everything
The
in.
only thing that we took out was we took out all railed and any mortalities that we had. And also we took out sick animals. So the graph that you're seeing here of 238 animals shows you that basically this was a healthy pen of cattle. But look at when you measure the feed intake, look at the difference in the variation of profit. About 41% of this pen was not profitable because of the amount that the animal was eating. So therefore, what we're trying to look at our technology is there's not a heck of a lot a producer can do with his top line. It's controlled by the market.
That's right.
But we have to look at costs.
So again, a way to reduce the amount of feed costs.
Reduce feed costs, but also sickness, disease has an override on that. If animals are sick or unwell, they are not performing well. So there's many things that we're looking at.
Now I know you had a metric for the amount of greenhouse gases reduced because of the less feed intake. What was that again?
Well, to reduce feed intake, the trait of residual feed intake, and I believe that you're going to have someone that will speak to that in a little bit more depth than I have, but residual feed intake can reduce feed intake in animals by about 12%. If you reduce feed intake without affecting gain or maintenance, and if you're capable of doing that, the corresponding reduction, obviously a feed intake reduction will also equate to a methane reduction, and research in Alberta has proven that we might be able to reduce emissions by up to 30%. 30%. NPK in manure by maybe up to 17%. So this is a trait that has a true economic value for a producer.
So not just net return, but also benefits to the environment and on resources. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Now you also have an example of this being done in a pasture example?
Yes.
So let's go to that for a second.
I think the holy grail for a producer is what's efficiency on pasture. And one of the things that we found is measuring on pasture is very complex. To measure the amount of forage disappearance has always been a challenge for any researcher. And unless you have a nice bevy of grad students, you're not going to be able to do it. So for us, going after measurement on pasture was probably the thing that we wanted to do most of all. So we partnered up with the Noble Foundation, the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation out of Ardmore, Oklahoma. It's a foundation that does producer applied research. And what we did is we installed our system that we designed for the feedlot, and we put it around confined water sources in 8 different pastures. And I've got a picture of what those pastures look like. So what we did is we installed watering units on 8 small grain pastures, as I said. These were cereal oat pastures, and what we were looking at is, could we measure things like stocking density? Could we measure different things? We were amazed. We started this research in February, and by about April or March, we realized that we had a tool that could give us some very good ideas of what's happening out on pasture. We found that the things that we measured in the animal told us as much about the animal as it did about the forage response. And so we're looking at a number of areas of different areas of research that we can pursue.
So how soon till this becomes something that the producer can use?
Well, I don't know if the producer will use it exactly as we see it, but I think that producers will use some part of the research and information that we've gained, maybe combined with their smartphone, maybe combined with small measurement units we can develop. But I would say that within the next year or so, we'll be testing this type of technology on cooperator herds.
Oh, fantastic. So this is really a different way to manage your pasture, or at least collect pasture information that maybe
Correct.
comes from a non-traditional source.
Correct.
It's not from looking at the vegetation, but how the vegetation is consumed.
That's correct.
All right, so that's quite radical. When we come back, you're going to chat about what you see as the future in agriculture,
Sure.
as you've been involved in this innovation for a while, and we'll hear from you then. So join us in a moment.